play the role that it has played. Since I'm not Rwandan, I don't have a horse in the race in Rwanda. It's up to the Rwandan people to decide their own future. However, I believe that it's my obligation as an American citizen to try and play some role in reducing the involvement of the U.S. in manipulating the African people. I think what we're beginning to see is a clear policy of U.S. military intervention in Africa. The establishment of AFRICOM is a clear indication of a plan for military involvement in Africa. While I was in detention, I understand there was a meeting of AFRICOM in Kigali, which is not surprising because there was and has been an ongoing relationship between the Pentagon and first the Ugandan military and then the RPF as early as 1988 and all through the war from 1990 up through 1994. Also, this election, of course, has not an election that is really a contest because there never has been this sort of infrastructure that exists in countries where a democratic contest can take place. And it's also true that the story that there was a long-planned genocide in Rwanda is so well situated and so well established that many people in Rwanda are so fearful of a change in government that the terror and the fear that exists I felt and witnessed myself, so that the prospect of a change in government seems beyond consideration. As you know also that I was charged with the crime of genocide denial, and so I think it's probably worth at least mentioning how it is I came to be an enemy of the state in Rwanda. So that certainly wasn't my intention. First of all, I've never made any public statements in Rwanda at all. The crimes that I was charged with had to do with my writing things and saying things at the ICTR, at the Rwanda Tribunal, and at my office in Minnesota. My crimes resulted from my being able to use the disclosure principles at the ICTR to be able to access United Nations files that had, except for these disclosure principles, would have been held confidential for at least 50 years. Not only would you not have known about them, the tribunal would not have known about them, the Rwandan government would not have known about them, I would not have known about them. Because I was able to access those files and put them into evidence at the ICTR, my client, who is one of the top 4 military officers in the former government, was found not guilty of any long-term planning or long-term conspiracy to kill civilians, much less Tutsi civilians. Now, the story that's been told is that the military of the former government was engaged in a long-term conspiracy. However, the court, after 7 years of the best evidence that the United Nations and the U.S. government and the Rwandan government and the forces of the prosecution could muster, in a tribunal in which the chief prosecutor has written a book that was published in 2009, in which she explained that when she was intent on prosecuting the side that won the war, the guys who are in power now, she was called to the State Department and told that she should drop her investigations and drop her prosecutions, which included the assassination of the former president of Rwanda, Habyarimana, and the assassination of Ntayamira of Burundi, who were killed on the same day, which is what touched off the Rwandan genocide. She was told she should drop those investigations by the U.S. State Department, or she'd be removed from office. When she said, "I work for the UN, not for the U.S., she was told she would lose her job. This was in the May of 2003. By October, she was out of office. So the victors in that war with the assistance of the United States, have never been prosecuted at the ICTR, although there is much evidence that both sides in the war committed crimes, not unlike the situation in World War II, where one side, of course, used nuclear weapons, the other side did not. But of course, only one side was prosecuted. Now, that isn't to say that massive numbers of Tutsis were not killed. They were. However, according to the evidence that the tribunal had, that was not the result of long-term planning on the part of the military. Now, there may have been some other conspiracies that were going on in other parts of the country. It's entirely possible. It may be that that people were killing people for ethnic reasons in parts of the country. That's possible. But was there a long-term plan at the top levels of the military? According to the tribunal, there wasn't sufficient evidence of that. The problem is that by saying what I just said now, by pointing to the evidence at the tribunal, I now become an enemy of the Rwandan state. Now, the difficulty with that, of course, is that having that kind of dialogue becomes impossible in Rwanda, and that means that the idea of having a democratic discussion or an election in which government policy is honestly discussed becomes extremely difficult. And the ICTR is actually adding to that problem because it's requiring us to say that only one side committed crimes during what essentially was a 4-year struggle for power in Rwanda. I would also suggest that the characterizing this struggle, which was a 4-year war, as Hutu and Tutsi is not exactly correct, because the question was more complex. There are class questions involved, questions of who controls resources, and more importantly, I want to quote to you an article by Herman Cohn, who was the Assistant Secretary of State for Africa from 1989 to 93 in the first Bush administration. This appeared in the New York Times December 16, 2008. He said, the conflict in the Eastern Congo over the past 12 years has been as much a surrogate war between the Congo and neighboring Rwanda as an internal ethnic insurgency, as the United Nations report underscored last week. Having controlled the Kivu provinces for 12 years, Rwanda will not relinquish access to the resources that constitute a significant percentage of its gross national product. You see, what has happened is that the Rwandan military has gone from 6,000 troops when the RPF invaded in 1990 to 65,000 according to the latest RPF report, or our CIA report rather. Rwanda is now controlling an area of the Eastern Congo approximately 13 times the size of Rwanda itself, controlling approximately $250 million in natural resources that are being removed from the Congo illegally, according to United Nations Security Council reports that were commissioned in 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2008, financed with a military that's being financed by the United States. There have been approximately 5 to 6 million people killed in the Eastern Congo during this period of time, all at a time when the United States is claiming that a genocide is going on in Darfur. A blind eye is being turned to a conflict and deaths that are being produced. 250,000 people were killed in Darfur in total. That number of people are being killed every 6 months in the Congo, and it doesn't get mentioned. Now, why is that occurring? Sudan has resource extraction arrangements with China. The resource extraction arrangements in the Eastern Congo are with Rwanda and Uganda, both of which are US supported surrogates. And I would suggest to you that this election is an example of a continuation of exactly the sorts of policies that the U.S. has had historically. Yesterday, there was a very interesting report that suggested that because of recently released confidential documents, it's now clear that the CIA played a significant role in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And those documents had been confidential for 50 years, and they now have come out. Because of the disclosure requirements of the ICTR, which are a unique opportunity in history to get at documents that would not have been released before, I was in the unique position of being able to get at these UN files. Those UN files are now in evidence at the ICTR, and they tell a story about what happened in Rwanda that would not have otherwise been released for 50 years, like these CIA documents were not released in 50 years. All of this is on my website, www.rwandadocumentsproject.net. They're also in evidence in the ICTR on the Military One document site at the ICTR.org website. And I invite you to investigate it yourself. And I know that the ambassador from Rwanda is here. I'm happy to dialogue about this because I'm sure that this is not information that's well known in Rwanda either. And one of the things I have to say is that while I was in detention, I was well treated by the people who were taking care of me. And I had an opportunity to talk with the upper level people in the detention facilities, and we talked about these things. And they were amazed to know that these records actually existed, and that the evidence exists that your president actually was responsible for assassinating President Habyarimana and President Ntaryamira, and that he's been indicted in not only France but also in Spain, and that the evidence exists in the ICTR exactly how that happened. Not just Ruzibiza, who is recanted, but the actual testimony of people who were in Malindi, which is where the RPF headquarters were, of exactly what happened when the news was received in Malindi about Habyarimana's assassination, and how the orders were given from Malindi to begin the assault to finally seize power on the night of April 6th. So the evidence is there. It's now in the public record. In the long run, it's going to be understood. And I just suggest that people read it, because it's not my opinion, and I got in trouble because I found the documents, and I'm a little sorry that I did, but I'm happy to be able to talk about the documents, and I hope that we can dialogue about them. But I'm very sorry that my country is actually responsible for much of the violence and the deaths in Central Africa.
Thank you, Peter.